Hello, this is the Trying Man here. And today I want to talk to you guys about obedience to God and the importance of it. Now, most of you who are believers know that obedience to God is essential and very necessary for our daily lives, for us to be pleasing to Him. Now, this teaching consists of, why is it so important to obey Him? And also the consequences for not. Now, the Lord has taught me along the way over the years as to how it is important to obey Him, sometimes directly and sometimes through life and certain circumstances, through my mistakes of not obeying and partially obeying. And I have seen the consequences of that in my own life, whether I obeyed Him 100% or not. Now, the reason why I'm making this video is because I just felt it in my heart to make such a video, because a lot of us know it is important, and yet sometimes we may stumble. We may find most of us may find it hard to obey Him. Why would that be? Well, mostly is because maybe certain desires in our life, certain desires in our hearts, prevent obedience to Him. And that in itself grieves Him very much. It grieves the Father because He wants to see us do our very best, and He wants the best for us. Now, there have been examples as to why obedience is essential and important to God the Father. And the reason for that is quite simply because He loves us and does not want to see us go down the wrong path. We have examples for the negative consequences of disobedience to God since the very beginning, at the times of Genesis, where Adam and Eve were told not to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And on that day, and God told them, on that very day they eat of that fruit, they shall die. Now, due to being tempted by the snake, that is also known as the devil, or Lucifer, Eve got tempted for the very wisdom it can bring, and decided to eat of it, gave some to her husband, he ate. And that is the reason why the world is in the condition it is in today. That is also the reason why that Jesus, or Yeshua, was sent from earth. Was sent from heaven to earth by the Father to make Himself a sacrifice for us, for our transgressions and sins, past, present, and future, and was raised back and preached the kingdom, of course, as Scripture says. Now, one of the things I've learned, and I've seen it from the Bible to my own life, that God requires and demands obedience. and desires us to obey. He does not, and let me get on this point as well. Why would a God require and desire and demand obedience from us? Well, for the plain simple fact that he desires it. He's sovereign, of course. Any Christian can tell you that. Well, or perhaps most that are in the know of this knowledge and wisdom would say that. And the other reason is because he desires the best for us, as I said before. And there are many examples of those who obeyed him received the blessings and the goodness and the revelations of the goodness of God. From Abraham to Isaac, Jacob, there are other examples such as Gideon, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, most of the prophets, and especially, last but certainly not least, Jesus and the apostles. Now, in order to receive God's best, we must strive to obey him, to honor him, to love him with all our hearts and minds. And from the root of it all, in the end, is love, but also obedience as well. Now, there are examples of those who disobeyed him, such as, what's his name? Yes, Saul, and other people of the biblical times. And one of the examples is Saul lost the kingdom of Israel, because of a simple act of disobedience where he spared all the spoils and the women and children of I believe they were the Philistines, I believe. But, and if I'm wrong, you can correct me on that. But in any case, God rejected him and regretted making him king, and David was his successor. And he and David, throughout all persecution from Saul, and even his sons, or was it? Yeah, I believe it was one son. I can't recall his name. But in any case, his obedience steered Israel toward the right path. Obedience to who, of course? Well, obedience to the Father. As in those days, where the people were prosperous for those who obeyed God, and those who disobeyed him all shared within the consequences of their choices. So do we. When we call ourselves either Christians or believers, we have a certain responsibility towards not only one another, but to God as well. The God whom we serve, the God who is written about in the Bible. So, if we have that responsibility, we should not take it lightly. If we are to have such a loving relationship with him, then most certainly we should most definitely obey him every step of the way.